Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and hello to all of you. This is the lecture for chapter 10, that is private retirement scheme. Okay, this is one of the very important chapter, but this chapter mainly related to the function of the private retirement scheme, or the PRS, and I will go through all of this together with you. As an introduction, we can see that due to the enhancement of the life expectancy, we can see that the current retirement fund that an individual has might be inadequate, might be insufficient, because the life expectancy has been increasing in recent years due to better medical as well as technological part of life. Thus, in order to cater for the insufficient fund, we need an additional retirement fund. And in this instance, the PRS, or the private retirement scheme, it functions as a complement to the EPF. Okay, so we already know that EPF is mandatory. Therefore, the contribution or the investment in PRS act as a voluntary in order to, is one of the mechanism that can be used to cater for additional fund during retirement. If we look at the Malaysian pension landscape, we can divide them into two main categories. The first one is public sector versus private sector. In public sector, we have Kumpulan Wang Amanah Pencen. Okay, this is for the pension, as well as Lembaga Tabung Angkatan Tentera. Okay, both of them, this is LTAT is actually for the army in Malaysia. And in the private sector, we have EPF that we already discussed in the previous chapter. And we can see that another category that can be developed is where mandatory versus voluntary. Where mandatory comprised of EPF is a mandatory for the company to follow, while the voluntary pension scheme includes PRS, okay, annuity that we already discussed in chapter 9. As in the Malaysian market, we can see these are among the key players in the pension market: the EPF, KWAP, LTAT, employer-sponsored schemes, as well as annuities. I think that you have been, quite familiar with all of this, except for employer-sponsored scheme. This employer-sponsored scheme is actually one of the benefits given by the employer to employee, but this is rare. It's hard for us to find in Malaysian market, but it exists. Okay, it exists, but it's only possibly applied to certain number of people only. Alright, some information about EPF here is basically the active contributors as well as employers that contributing to EPF, and it has a specific rate of contribution, and as I already explained before, that the rate for employee has been reduced to 7% due to COVID-19 pandemics, and the withdrawals at the age of 50%, that is at the age of 50, that is for account 2 only, and the remaining you can withdraw at the age of 55. And the investment in EPF mainly fixed income because it's more secured, but it also allow for a little bit for equities at certain rate, and they can also, you can diversify your investment in EPF through EPF members investment scheme. When there is a certain criteria that you fulfill, only then you can invest in the investment scheme provided by EPF. As for Kumpulan Wang Amanah Pencen, is a pension liability with the government, and this KWAP actually replaced the old pension trust fund in 2007, and mainly to serve for the pension for the government serving. Okay, in regards to Lembaga Tabung Angkatan Tentera, this is a retirement scheme for the army in Malaysia, and it provides a regular payment where serving members contribute 10% of the monthly salary, while the government, being the employer, will contribute 15% of the salary. As for employer-sponsored schemes, As I said before, it is rare. It's alternative form of retirement scheme offered by employer. I have seen that large firms sometimes offer alternative retirement scheme to the board of director. So this is a special scheme designed for, as I've seen in the case of large firm in Malaysia, where they will give a specific retirement fund scheme for the board of director at a certain rate, which is not similar to the EPF. Another elements in retirement scheme obviously is annuities. We already discussed about this a lot in chapter 9, and please recall about that. Alright, now we're going to look at the objectives and benefits of PRS. Again, we can see that there is an increasing trend of the age for the male and female in Malaysia. In 1956, the average life expectancy is 56, while in 2020, we can see that the life expectancy of the male is 75, while for female it's now become 79. Okay, therefore it is important for us to cope with the retirement fund once an individual has been retired, and in doing so we need to increase the retirement fund in order to cope with the expenses that has been occurred during retirement age. Alright, so given that the retirement age is quite long for Malaysian nowadays, what kind of steps that need to be taken to cater for that issue? Number one, possibly we can raise the retirement age so that the retirement age of 55 seems to be too low by Asian and global standard. Possibly we still can encourage people to work up to 60 or 65, because it seems that possibly if they are still healthy and be able to work, then why not let them work, so that they are utilizing, you know, that the function of the body well, and at the same time can also increase the accumulation of the fund during the retirement. The second is by increasing the contribution rate. So the percentage of the rate saving for the purpose of retirement we can increase, or by increasing the minimum wage. So if the wage is high, then surely the saving will be higher. And the last one, by developing a voluntary retirement scheme where we encourage people to save more money rather than keeping the money in the EPF. Alright, some of the benefits of the PRS, obviously it can be used to cover the cost during retirement age. PRS holder can get a tax relief up to 3,000, and it is one of the reliable investment vehicle for the retiree, and it provides a pool of fund for the retiree during retirement. It's also one form of long-term capital, alright, and it also in general will improve the Malaysian capital markets, because once you keep your money in this PRS, it will be invested. Okay, it will be invested and it will stimulate the market, the capital market of investment in Malaysia. Besides that, it will also reduce the burden of government to provide a social safety net for the elderly. So the money earned by the government can be used for other purpose, for educational or medical purpose. So it's not just solely for the need of the elderly in this case, because the elderly seems might have a sufficient fund for them to cover themselves during retirement. Okay, now we are going to look at the PRS regulatory framework. The PRS regulatory framework in Malaysia is actually regulated by Securities Commission, and there's a specific acts for Securities Commission to empower the regulation of the PRS industry in Malaysia. Okay, so the Securities Commissions, they have enforcement power to the PRS and make sure that the PRS function effectively by providing a well-regulated and supervised private retirement scheme, choice and flexibility in the members in the effort to save for retirement, building trust and confidence, facilitating a cost-effective private pension framework, and safeguarding the interests of the members through prudent operational guideline. And here are some of the information related to legislation, regulation, and guideline. For example, Capital Market Service Acts, Capital Market and Service, and new other guidelines issued by Securities Commission to ensure that the PRS industry operate in a safe and secure environment. Okay, and here mainly the guideline for the PRS in offering the PRS scheme, where the PRS provider must comply with the guideline given by Securities Commission. Okay, and here you can see the key components of the framework where the PRS allowed to offer private retirement scheme where under certain acts they are allowed to administer the fund under the individual scheme, and at the same time they have a responsibility to the PRS member by providing high standard of integrity, managing fund to the best interest of the employers, and some of the exercising degree of care and diligence, etc., to the employers. Oh, sorry, not to the employers, but to the PRS members. Okay, here is information about PRS distributions and consultant. Now we have PRS provider, the one that actually provide the PRS. Another function, another parties related to PRS, we call it as PRS distributors, as well as PRS consultant. PRS distributors license, they have a license for dealing in PRS or registered person under CSMA, okay, under the Securities Commission Act. And this is a PRS consultant. This is where you have a potential to work here, in the sense that if you have the RFP and if you work in the industry for 2 years, then you can start to register with FIM. Okay, and then you need to take the PRS exam for you to become a PRS consultant. Okay, the Securities Commission will appoint a person that will be in charge in administrative function of the PRS. We call this as private pension administrator. Okay, so this is a person approved by SC to perform the function of record keeping, administration, and customer service of the members and contributors in relation to contribution to the PRS. And here are some of the specific duties of PPA. Alright, basically receiving and transmitting instruction in a manner specified by SC, because this is the person that has been approved by Securities Commission to check on the administration and customer service function of the PRS. So this individual is responsible to make sure that the PRS actually following the regulation that has been set by Securities Commission. Okay. Now we are going to look at the key features of the PRS. Investment in PRS we can divide into two parts. The first one is core funds and the second one is non-core funds. We already know that PRS is actually one form of investment vehicle and mainly used for the purpose of retirement. Okay, so one benefit of PRS is where you can get a tax relief up to 3,000, okay, per year. So this is one of the benefit offered by PRS. Therefore, for the purpose of retirement planning in the financial planning report, you may suggest your client to invest in the PRS because at the same time they can get a tax relief. Besides that, all the PRS scheme are also exempted from the interest income received, and this is also one of the tax incentive under PRS. Alright, the PRS also have some kind of similar system to EPF because they have account A and account B. Account A will keep 70% of the fund, account B will keep the 30% of the fund. Okay, and you can only withdraw the money at the retirement age, that is 55. So in the case of PRS, they also define retirement age at the age of 55. Alright, if in the case you want to withdraw the money, okay, you can withdraw the money from the account B, but there is a penalty of 8%. Okay, there's a penalty of 8% that you have to pay in the case the contributor want to withdraw the money from the account B. As for the account A, it cannot be withdrawn until the member reach the retirement age. Only then it can be withdrawn from the account. There are 4 situations where a member can withdraw their fund from the PRS. That is, number 1 is pre-retirement withdrawal, where it is subject to 8% penalty, and you can withdraw once you retire. The third one, in the case if you departure from Malaysia, let's say you are not going to stay in Malaysia anymore, you're going to migrate to another country forever, for example, then you can withdraw the money from PRS. And the last one, in the case of death, then the money can be withdrawn from the PRS account. Alright, now we're going to look at the constitution of the PRS. PRS provider can offer up to 10 funds. It can be Sharia compliance or the conventional funds. And if the members do not select specific PRS fund, there must be a default option. Means that if you invest in PRS but you didn't select specific fund that you want to invest, then that particular investment will automatically go to a default investment or default option. Okay, so for all time, the PRS provider must ensure that the PRS offers to the public has the default option, which consists of these 3 main fund. Okay, the first one is conservative fund, the second one is the moderate fund, while the third one is growth fund. Alright, now we're going to look at the authorization of the funds. The funds under PRS must be authorized by Securities Commission, where the PRS provider must submit the approval of the scheme from the Securities Commission together with the core funds okay, that they want to develop. Okay, so as we already know, the core funds comprise of conservative, moderate and growth. After they receive an approval from the Securities Commission, only then they can apply for non-core fund. Okay, and the authorization may be revoked by the Securities Commission if they found that the application is false or misleading, or in the case they found that the core funds are not launched within 6 months, or in the case of certain requirements are not fulfilled, for example, so the license can be revoked, okay, by the Securities Commission. In order to naming the funds, as we already said before, once they want to get an approval, they also have to put forward the proposal for the core funds. Therefore, in order to naming the funds, it should be in this way. Okay, the first one is the name of the PRS provider, and then growth funds. Name of the PRS provider, moderate funds. Name of the PRS provider, conservative funds. So each PRS will have these 3 core funds initially. They must have this. And after that, if once they get an approval, only then they can develop the non-core funds. Okay, but the non-core funds also the choosing of the name must not be misleading. Okay, how they choose the name should be appropriate where, for example, like this. Okay, here are actually the example of inappropriate funds. Let's say they call it as super performance fund, cannot lose fund, sure win fund, okay, double derivative fund, or Warren Buffett fund. This is, you know, like scheme cepat kaya style, so it is not acceptable for the non-core funds to be named like this. Okay, or they call it like Al Sultan Abdullah fund or Sultan Brunei fund, yeah, or they possibly use a name related to racism issues, for example. So this is also not acceptable and not appropriate. Okay, so this is something that the SC will look into. Alright, now we are going to look at the general risk profile of funds, and we can divide the fund types into several categories. The first one is the cash management fund, and it is invested primarily in the money market instrument such as fixed deposit, and it is very much less risky as compared to other type of funds. As in the PRS, you already know that the PRS provider must provide a conservative fund, moderate fund, and growth funds. Conservative fund, the criteria is the maximum of 20% invested in the equities. Okay, so in terms of risky, because it's just 20% invest in the equities means that it is less risky. As for moderate fund, maximum 60% in equity market, so it is quite volatile. It has a moderate risk, and sometimes we call it also under, you know, like a balanced funds, in the sense that the equities and fixed income instrument is balanced within this fund. The third one is the growth funds, where the maximum 70% invested in the equities market, which is highly volatile, highly risky, but at the same time also have a high potential to get high gain. The next fund is what we call as index funds, and it depends. If it is an index fund for equity, then it is high risk, but if it's an index fund for bond, that it will be less risky. Sometimes in regards to the index, we also have to look at the country index, where it depends on the stability and the economic condition of the country. Emerging country, for example, like China, they are basically very volatile, and for equities in developed markets such as UK or US, we can see that the index will be much more stable in the equity market. And certain country like Asia, it has, you know, like different country will actually provide you with different types of return depending on the economic situation, the stability of politics, social, government system, etc., etc. That's all for what you need to learn in the PRS private retirement scheme. That's all for this video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and bye bye.